Um, well, hi, it's great to meet you. Here, funny little thing. So my friends haven't like read this. I started reading this. I did the audiobooks. My dad had
Yeah,
gotten me like the Audible credits for my birthday a couple of years ago.
yeah.
And I just started listening to them, and I've been just a huge fan ever since. And then I've like slowly been getting my friend like some people to like listen to it and like try to introduce people to it and stuff. And
Yeah.
I don't have anybody like around me to talk to, and I was like, and I my friends have made the joke that I got so annoyed with not being able to talk to like with anybody about this that I had to go and talk to the creator.
Yeah. Oh, your room looks a lot more interesting and nerdy than mine.
Yeah, well, it's college life, so you gotta
Well,
get.
this is the yeah. Well, for some reason, I've decided to set up so it's pointing at the tedious corner of my office. What you can't see is a bunch of like posters from the book up on my wall there.
Yeah, you guys need a lot more on that website. You only got the one. Um,
I know. I'm yeah. I want to be very careful about the art that I release. I am working on some stuff, but it's a slow
Yeah, no, I love all of
process.
the artwork for the cover art is like always. I always try it whenever before it's released because I only listen to the audiobook. I don't
Mm-hmm.
go, but before it's released because the pre-order will come out. I try and look at the cover art and see what I can like get from that whenever I look at it. Just
Yeah,
because it's always intricate and there's always like a lot that shows like a scene from the book or whatever's gonna go on.
yeah. Well, the artist doesn't never reads this stuff.
No,
No,
it
never.
always like it always. I can always picture it like at a certain point
Mm,
within the books, at least
yeah.
eventually.
I mean, they are all scenes from the books, but yeah. But no, some of the art I'm working on, I have no idea when it's gonna finally hit, but it's um it's stuff I'm extremely happy with.
Yeah. Um.
So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that getting out there so I can start using it in stuff.
Yeah. I'm super excited for the future of the series and stuff like that. Just
Mm,
just rocking with it as it comes. But anyways, this is for a podcast and like play by play and that type of stuff course at my school.
okay.
I only need 15 minutes for this class thing,
Yeah.
so I if I'll get that, and then if you want to keep talking to
Yeah.
me, I'm more than happy to take up.
That's cool. If you want to do it podcast style or whatever,
Well, it's just
that's
like we had to get an interview or whatever, so like really, I'm just
yeah.
going for just having a conversation, just like
Yeah.
how this is.
Yeah,
Um,
not a problem.
no, I'm super excited to be talking with you today, even though you're in the future technically. So, but
No, no, you're in America.
yes,
You're
I'm in
in you're in the past. That's just how it works.
uh, yeah, we sit
Yeah.
here.
Check the news, guy.
Yeah. You got anything I need to know? Come, got some numbers for me?
Yes, you're in America. Run.
Well, you make that you don't make too
Not
many
to a
points.
school.
I'll wait till I'm out of school. I got a semester left. I'll finish that, and then
Yeah.
I'll head for the hills. Um,
Uh,
well, you know what? I can touch on that. You make very slight comments. Like you try to stay. Obviously, you have your own political views and stuff. You try to stay
yeah.
pretty at behind that.
Yeah.
And how has that influenced like the character of Jason and like the way that he proceeds his life?
Oh, Jason is more um anti-American than I am. Like I might joke about he's a little, bitter about it, but because Jason has is based like certainly where he starts
Yeah,
around book one
naked,
is yeah, yeah,
without
but
any pants.
Jason in book one is just kind of an amalgam of all my character flaws from about 20 years ago.
Oh,
um
that's fun.
and that's kind of his starting point.
Yeah,
Um, and so he learns and grows, but he's also still a deeply flawed character.
Yeah, which I how you develop your characters, I like really love and enjoy because like all of your characters are so flawed in a positive way though. What like brought you to be able to make them like that? Like how do you create these characters so intricate and detailed?
Well, I guess my process for creating a character starts with like there's a need in the story for a character to fill a certain role. And then I start by looking at, the kind of character that will, be that square peg for the square hole. And
Absolutely.
then that gives me sort of a baseline of what I need. So then I sort of work backwards to what produces a character that is this. So what because generally if a character is showing up to do a thing, it means I've already got something like motivation, like they're trying to do something or why they're trying to do that something, and then it just sort of works backwards from there. Because when I'm world building and character building anything, I just sort of start with what I have and what I need, and then just start asking questions. So it's like, I need this character to do this. Why is the character doing this? Okay, so why did they get to a point where this? And and it's the same thing with world building. It's if I've got, okay, so I've got these magical things that happen in the world. What does that mean for society? What does that mean for people? And that's how I've got social structures that incorporate all the magic and social systems that differ from how it is on Earth, because I'm really the big difference between Earth and Pali is the concept of power seated in the individual versus
Yeah.
power seated in the group.
You brought up your magic and how you have that
Yeah,
integrated. How did you come up with such a unique magic system?
slowly.
Cuz
Um,
it's just
yeah,
incredible.
yeah. A lot of people, I think, when they start looking at lit RPG or fantasy in general, will start to think about, what would I do for a magic system, especially lit RPG, because everything's there on the page.
Yeah.
And I wasn't any different in that regard. So many years before I ever wrote this story, I just started, what would it be like? Um, because I used to do something similar. There's a tabletop role playing game called Mage the Ascension Awakening, the earlier one, and part of that is almost building a paradigm, which is kind of like a magic system for yourself. That sort of because it's quite free form, so you kind of got to figure out how your magic works. And I used to do that a lot with my friend. We just, rather than play the game, we just come up with characters with magic and how the magic worked and why. And when I found lit RPG, that was kind of a natural extension of that. What would I do for a system? And I was actually looking just last week at some of my old notes from very, very early on.
Oh.
Um, yeah, because I wasn't looking to write anything, but I'd come up with, a system, and then I'd maybe like write a few chapters and see how that goes, just to see how it worked and in a narrative. And that's kind of when I realized my biggest problem, which was that I was creating game systems for a story.
Oh.
Um, and what stories don't have that a video game has is a massive back end to do all the maths for you, like to do all the processing in a story. And in a story, you have to explain everything. So you have to explain what all the powers are. So the sort of the early iteration of what it is started off with you had some abilities, and those abilities would unlock more abilities, and those abilities would unlock more abilities.
Yeah.
And I got to the point where I had a character was like plotted out with like 207 powers or something. I was like, yeah, this is not going to work. So and that was when I realized that what I needed to do was stop building a system for a game and start building a system for a book. It's a narrative tool, not an actual game system.
That's
Uh,
yeah, that's cool. That's super interesting because like
yeah,
like how you explain that, you can see how you got to a point you're like, you know what, 20 abilities is enough to
yeah.
interwork with one another.
20 abilities is still probably too much because all those extra powers and stuff that sort of got translated into just rank. So you got abilities, and those abilities get sort of like extra bits as you go up. So yeah, if you count all the ranks and stuff, that's still far, far too many powers.
Yeah, I can
It's,
imagine
yeah,
um, scaling it to
um,
diamond rank.
yeah, because my least favorite chapters are the ones where I just have to explain a whole bunch of powers in fairly short order.
Yeah,
So I try to spread that out these days. Like I'll try and some I'll have just like there'll be like three different powers that pop up in a fight, or there'll be a few powers, and I'll just put some banter between characters about them in the middle to try and make it a lot less dry
yeah.
and yeah,
I had noticed.
because
I was thinking
yeah,
about this the other day when I was listening to Book Nine, which I finished in 2 days after it came out. But I had noticed because like
okay. Well, normally I'd scold you for not finishing it in one day, but actually it lasts longer than 24
yeah,
hours.
it's
So I
yeah.
yeah,
You can't. I'm not, and I don't speed it up. Heath Miller does like I don't
yeah.
want to dilute his voice. He does such an
That
amazing job.
look, I'm personally a written word guy. I think that's makes sense. I'm a writer,
Yeah.
but the concept of like fast forwarding your audiobook seems nuts to me.
No, so like the reason why I had gotten into audiobooks and
Mm,
stuff is because
yeah,
at work I'm allowed to wear headphones and stuff. So
yeah,
I'm just at work on my off time, or if I'm going outside, and I just listen to books and stuff. And
yeah,
it's such a great pastime for me. Uh, I had tried to, because I whenever I was waiting for, I think, book 7 to come out,
yeah.
I was like, I could just read it online, but I was like, no, I've made it this far. I'll just wait. And
People absolutely love Heath's work.
he does
Um,
amazing work. I
mm,
um through Heath, I found like all of the other Podium catalogs and stuff.
yeah,
And just opened up a world of like, because the lit RPGs and like power fantasy books are just so much fun to listen to,
yeah,
and to just delve into those worlds and stuff.
yeah. Because and that's another thing. I never originally planned audio. I didn't plan anything. Like this was me in my bedroom knocking out a free web novel. That's how this started.
Yeah.
I kind of hoped to make a little money on Patreon. I wasn't working at the time. Um, so it was a bit of a gamble for me, but that, exploded way bigger than I
What
ever.
was that like? I'm so curious, like, because I wasn't there for the beginning. What was
Yeah.
like that world for you
Okay.
like?
I don't know how familiar you are with like the web serial space.
Like I am I read like some
Yeah.
stuff, and I'm familiar with Royal Road and stuff like that.
Yeah. So that's where it started, Royal Road. And I wasn't special. I did my I wanted this to work, because
As anybody does.
I wanted to be a writer. So I did a lot of prep. I actually did a draft of what eventually uh, got rewritten as the first three books. That before I ever released anything. It was way too shortchanged everything. It was an absolute piece of crap. And it was all really because of one flaw, which was I'd never finished a long form work before.
Okay.
So I had this obsession about getting to the end.
Oh, so
Uh, so
yeah.
I was just skipping things, like, not fleshing out characters, just doing it. Like the first three books are quite long.
Yes, they're like
Um,
they're like, I think audiobook wise, I think they're like 28 hours, like that first one or something like that.
uh, yeah, but the first three books are I know, like three quarters of a million words or something.
Wow.
It's whopping. But the original version of those three books was only 66 chapters long, and those chapters weren't particularly lengthy ones.
I couldn't I couldn't imagine like
I'm
getting like
Yeah.
I feel like there's like even as now like there's like I could remember listening to it and like having so many questions of like, oh, what if this and yada yada yada, like,
Yeah.
so just, and I love the depth of which your characters are filled out. I don't think I would have teared up when Farah died in that first book
Yeah.
if you hadn't
Mm.
flushed out all these characters and made them
Oh yeah. No.
so
Oh
relatable.
yeah. No, yeah, the that version will never see the light of day. It is so,
Unless you would have sent it to me, I
so
promise I won't share it. But
no,
go
no,
on.
no, no. It is shockingly bad. It is just cringe inducing to look at. I do still have it, but I may just take the hard drive it's on and throw it in the ocean. I don't know.
Maybe that's like once the series is complete, you
Nope.
know, throw it out there.
No, but yeah, but so yeah, I started off with just the web fiction getting released, and I was, building up a small number of readers, but I think everyone sort of needs a lucky break
Yeah,
if they're going to take off. Mine was, there are certain reviewers on Royal Road who are very highly regarded, and there's actually there are a bunch of like top lists on the front page of Royal Road.
yeah,
Like there's the top new books that are trending, and there's the most popular books, and most popular of all time, highest rated. And one of those lists is the top reviews list.
yeah.
And a review of my story was the top rated review for something like 7 weeks.
Wow.
And getting on the front page of Royal Road for anything is huge, because it means your readership will explode. Like if you're trying to, have your story take off, everyone's trying to get on the trending page or Rising Stars. It was trending back in the day. I think it's changed up now. I think it's Rising Stars, but
That sounds right.
you want to get on that front page so you can take off. And back then, I think you had to have a certain amount of content and have been releasing regularly for a month before you could even get on the trending page. Um, but I got on there way early because I sort of snuck in because the top review happened to be of my story, and it was a positive review, which certainly
Yeah.
helped.
I wouldn't. I feel
Um,
like a negative review wouldn't make
yeah,
it that
may
high.
may not have been ideal. Yeah,
Yeah.
but from there, yeah, explosion. And and once I got a whole bunch of readers, they started asking for a Patreon.
Yeah.
Royal readers have that sort of expectation that there will be a Patreon, and that Patreon will have bonus chapters.
Yeah.
Um, Fortunately, I'd done a lot of planning beforehand. Before I ever released, I researched what a launch could look like, and how to try and get attention, which is, I think, part of how I got reviewed and got it so early.
Being
So
prepared. Yeah.
my original release rate was 5 per week.
Yeah. And now it's the Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yeah. So I did that because when I was sort of rewriting the story to the actual released version, I just sort of sat down and said, how much can I write sustainably to release? So, I sat down and I was writing. I was unemployed at the time, so all I was doing was writing basically. And I could comfortably churn out 5 chapters a week. That was naive, extremely naive, for a few reasons. One being, I had no idea how much non-writing stuff actually went into releasing. So part of it's just I format it for Royal Road. I reformat it for Scribble Hub, which is a similar site that I also put it on. I format it for Patreon. I make the PDF versions that are on Patreon. I spent increasing amounts of time in comment sections, just responding to readers, because that was critical community.
Yeah.
Making mistakes, learning lessons.
And I'm grateful
Um,
that you have such good interaction at the moment.
yeah, because people were asking for a Discord server,
Hmm.
um, which I know very little about. Basically, my friend had a Discord server that we used to talk to each other while playing games, and that was as much as I knew about it. So I had to learn how to start up a Discord server. It's not super hard, thankfully. I'm not that good at tech stuff, but I'm middle aged. I'm allowed to be crap.
Yeah,
Um,
you're good, man.
but yeah, and it just sort of started growing from there. The Patreon took off immediately and wildly beyond my expectations. Like, um, I put up two goals. I was on unemployment benefits at the time, so put up two goals. One was halfway to off unemployment, and the other was all the way off unemployment. And this was start of September of 2019 that I started my Patreon with those two goals. I was hoping, maybe I can actually like sort of get off unemployment by like, November, December, if this goes well. It took a day and a half, and those goals had uh, basically when I achieve these goals, I'll release like an extra week's worth of chapters. Like I'll basically do double chapter releases for a week. Um, and yeah, that got so immediately. So all the advanced chapters that I had ready to go sort of disappeared immediately, and I had to edit them a lot sooner than I was expecting.
Oh, I
uh,
couldn't imagine the rush. Just
yeah, because I had I forget how many chapters I had to start off with, about 75 before I started releasing anything. But when I started releasing, my first week I did triple releases, so that's three chapters a day, each weekday, and then two chapters a week, and then the third. And by the third, when I was at my regular schedule, the plan was to, get people hooked, and then all of a sudden they're asking for, those extra chapters in the Patreon. And oddly enough, that went more or less exactly to plan, thanks to my lucky
a little
break.
too well.
Yeah. But that's the thing, like in Australia, they don't kick you off unemployment benefits over time. What they do is they basically make it more and more annoying to stay on them. Like you'll have to do volunteer work and you have to apply for like a buttload of jobs, like way more jobs than is even practical. So you end up applying for a whole bunch of jobs you don't want along with the ones that you do.
Hmm.
Um, but I kind of accidentally got a job interview like the week before my Patreon launched. So I'd been releasing chapters for about a month. And I was incredibly nervous. My Patreon was going to be launching in like 5 days, at which point I was going to discover if this was all going to work out or if I needed to go get a job at a McDonald's or something. I do not have a lot of marketable skills.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, basically, until then, made like writing stories on the internet in your bedroom about a kung fu wizard somehow a viable career. I was pretty screwed.
Hey, but
Um,
you
I,
nailed it,
I, I,
by the way.
I really lucked out on that one. But I ended up getting this job interview, and the job was pretty awful. It was call center work. It was like in this industrial park, out past where public transport would go,
Not an
and
office
it was
supplies retail manager.
no, it was an electricity company. It was also a short term contract.
Oh.
Because basically they'd passed a law saying the power companies weren't allowed to um, screw people over in a certain way without telling them. So they were about to have to send out a whole bunch of letters to people saying, "We're screwing you over very, very badly. For more information, please call this number." And, I was going to be one of the other people at the end of that number.
That would not have been fun.
That was the job. Um, but I didn't want this job. I had to go to the interview because if you
Yeah.
refuse an interview, they kick you off your benefits. but I was very focused on this, on my book at that point. So I go to this thing and I'm completely phoning it in. Like, it was like, a group interview and some personal interviews and roaming around the place. But as it turns out, not giving a crap looks a lot like being extremely confident.
That'll do it to you.
So I ended up getting offered this job. Um, so yeah, and it started the same day my Patreon was going to launch. So basically, I did, if I ended up getting this job and it worked and the Patreon worked, I'd have to quit immediately and hope the Patreon didn't subsequently fall off. Um, because because if the Patreon kind of worked but not enough to sort of sustain me, I'd have to do both, and I did not have time to do both. I
Yeah.
At that point I was writing full time, just wasn't getting paid for it.
Yeah. Uh,
Um, yeah. What ended up happening was my like references fell through from my last crappy job, which was actually working as Santa's fattest elf at a Santa photo thing at Christmas time in a shopping mall.
that's great. That's wonderful. You got to work that
Uh,
in.
yeah. Oh no, that was terrible because the woman out of state who actually ran the whole division and the woman who was the manager on site hated each other, detested each other. Like one, like the manager thought the division leader was a tyrant. The other one thought the manager was stealing. So she kept calling me to do the manager's job.
Yeah, but you gotta have those
It was
gotta have those
it
bad
was
jobs to
it was an
develop yourself.
absolute it was an absolute shit show. But yeah, the woman who was my reference ended up moving on from the company, and oddly enough, didn't go, "Hey, what about that guy who's a reference? I should probably call him and tell him I'm moving on." She just didn't decide to do that for some reason. Um, so my reference fell through, and they withdrew the job offer. Which was good because then if the Patreon failed, I'd still be able to get on unemployment.
Yippee.
But as it happened, didn't need to. Everything exploded, and now I managed to buy a house instead of living in a crappy apartment where the my entire bedroom literally shifts in the wind, and the bedroom window is held shut with a stick. Um,
Well, not anymore. A
yeah.
man of means in his own cloud palace of choice.
Yeah, it's not a cloud palace, but I'm pretty comfortable with the house I bought. You know, I was dreaming about buying some great big glass thing in the sky that looks at, but no, I bought a nice house. It's just a sensible house in a quiet neighborhood. It's got nice river views, but yeah,
Absolutely.
but and that was it because when I started finding success, like, because I didn't go looking for publishers, I didn't have time. Like, those 5 chapters a week I could comfortably write. Once you add in comment sections and thingo, and then any real life interference whatsoever, soaking up time. Yeah, I did not get a lot of sleep those that sort of first month after the Patreon started. I was scrambling to get out those extra chapters and whatnot. Um, and set up discords and learn everything I needed to learn. Um, and and that stress kind of didn't stop.
Yeah.
As sort of extra tasks sort of piled up. I ended up sort of hiring my best friend as an assistant to take over like a lot of the sort of administrative load, which is very, very good because I wouldn't have made it this far if I didn't have someone help me with that. Because by the end of last year, I was completely burnt out. I was absolutely cooked. That's why I reduced my writing schedule finally because I couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Yeah.
I think everybody is still more than happy with the content that we're getting.
Well, the other thing is, when I first started, I knew that there had to be a certain amount of content in order to build an audience. That's just the way it works
Yeah.
on web serials. You have to have a certain amount out there, um, and it has to be consistent and it has to come through. So basically, I made a choice at the start. Like, there's a spectrum between quantity, where you churn out any old crap, and quality, where you do revision after revision and edit and all that stuff. And I had to sort of pick a spot on that spectrum. And I picked, quite a lot of quantity, but I also didn't want to just chuck out any old crap. So I made sure, I wasn't just writing a draft and then slapping it on the internet. I'd revise and I'd show it to people and I'd get it back and I'd make changes. And um, it's still not where I'd like it to be. But having reduced the schedule, it's getting closer. Like, a lot of people on the Patreon have been saying that, but the chapter quality has just gone up since I started slowing down. And that's not a coincidence.
Yeah.
I have more time to spend on chapters. But the other thing is, because I'm not constantly stressed and constantly sleep deprived, then the things I was doing before don't take as long. Because when you constantly sleep, because I was doing 18-hour days, 5 days a week the last half of last year, from about uh, definitely like September through November. I was just sleeping 3 or 4 hours a night and then just spending the rest of my time in my office. It was all takeout food, my assistant going out to get meals, and yeah, it was pretty ruinous. Um, and yeah, the ability to spend more time not only means I actually get a life where I get to do things. I get to see daylight. That's nice.
Hey, I can see it coming in through
Uh,
your room. I'm like,
yeah,
I'm sitting
yeah.
in the darkness.
I'm writing in the day. It's awesome. Um, but yeah, there's that, and there's the fact that things just don't take as long because I'm not always tired,
Yeah. Um,
which is great.
you had mentioned like the quality, like their
Hmm.
Patreonics like it had started to see better.
Yeah.
Um, how do you approach like balancing the expectations that people now have because of this audience that you've garnered, and just but then balancing that with you putting this out and just getting out what you want to have out there?
I know. I think you can't really um, go by the expectations of other people. Like, I've got my story and I'm writing my story, and I don't change things based on what other people may want a lot. I do it, but it's not like people want a character to go in this direction or a character to go in this direction or a plot point to happen a certain way. It's more like I'll write something that is maybe insensitive because of a blind spot that I have.
Yeah.
And I've actually got a really good community. And so, rather than going like, rah, or let's cancel shirts, what tends to happen is there'll be a discussion, usually in the Patreon comments, um, about people talking about, representation and what's good representation, what's bad representation. Um, and I've been able to, and this is not a lot. I've done this maybe 3 times, and at most it'll be a few pages. Um, but um, yeah, and it'll just be trying to represent things in better ways. For example, one of the largest changes I made was a character was revealed to be a lesbian, and she was behaving in a certain way, and I'd kind of based that off skeezy dudes. But what I was running into without knowing it was certain behaviors that are actually sort of problematic within the lesbian community that I was unaware of.
Yeah.
So this triggered a discussion. People let me know things. I got to learn a bit more. And then I was able to go and change that on the Patreon before it ever went to Royal Road, before it ever went to
External.
to the public to publication. So that would have been in that would have been in book 9. It was when because you've listened to book 9. It's when Jason and um Estella Warnock show up at the city of Uresh first.
Yeah.
And she's talking about like calling dibs on the princess.
Oh, yeah. Okay. What after?
Yeah. So
Okay.
and the thing is, when I went back and I rewrote that section, I think it came out better. And
It's very fluid. I think like all of your
because that's
characters.
one thing I don't want to do. I don't want to um sacrifice, you know, I don't want to make a scene worse to make it more sensitive. Um, but I've found that with revision in general, if you go back and you rework a thing, it tends to improve, and that's where the quality comes from, and that's where I'd like my writing to improve because I'll go back and I'll read some stuff and I'm like, this could use another pass, but I think you ask any writer anything, and there could always be another pass.
Absolutely.
But um, yeah, because I would love to write slower, but a part of what I do is I have to understand the commercial realities of doing this for a living. But I think um, as I get more prominent, as I've now got a pretty reliable audience base. Um, I've been able to slow down, and um, and I may continue to do that in the future. I don't know how it's going to play out, but at some point, I would like to just go low and slow, and really work on maybe a one shot book or something, that rather than, because I love web fiction, like the web serial process,
Yeah.
because it gives me constant deadlines,
Hmm.
which means I don't go, oh, well, that's not due for 3 months. I think I'll binge this
Procrastinate
television
on it.
show.
Yeah.
But I would like to, because now I'm much more self motivated than I was at the start. So I'd like to maybe go really slow and see what is the best, and especially now that I've written a lot more, I'm a lot more practiced, to see what I can do to write the best thing that I can, give it all the time it needs. Because that's not to say that I'm not proud of what I've done, but I also recognize that it could be better if it had more time. But if I'd given it more time, 4 people would have read it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
I
very
would just
interesting.
wouldn't have. Yeah.
So are you like you said like doing a one-off book? Would you want to stay in the world that you've created, or maybe like same universe-esque, or are you would you want to like delve into something different?
Um, this series is long. I originally guessed it'd be around 12 books. It is going to be longer than that. It just is. Everything always takes longer. See, I kind of planned it out in volumes.
Yeah.
I planned 4 volumes, and when I was originally, and the first volume quite neatly became the first 3 books.
Yeah, it kind of seems like there's like trilogies.
And the second one, with quite neatly, was the 4th, 5th, and 6th books, which are actually quite a bit shorter than the first 3. Um, but then the next volume, like, this is 4 books. Like, yeah, this 10th book will sort of wrap up this next arc. Starting with Jason going back to Palian, yeah. And yeah, and that's much longer. Like, not only are book 9 is humongous.
Yeah, book 9 was the biggest like since those first 3. I was
Actually,
super excited about it.
book 9 is the largest one in the series. It tops out book 1 just by a little bit, by about like 16,000 words or something.
Crazy. I love it.
Um,
It's dense and it's great.
yeah. Um,
Although you did my boy
yeah. I'm,
Oslo
I'm,
wrong.
yeah. I'm quite happy with book 9. Um, I know I like them all, but I think like 7 is another one of my favorites. 8 is in a lot of ways just sort of a uh, moving the pieces around between sort of book 7 and 8.
I really liked
Sorry,
two. I feel
between 7 and 9. Yeah,
Yeah, I feel like two, like in my mind, because like I've gone back to book
yeah,
two. Book two felt like you figured out what you were doing, and then
hmm,
and that set the precedent for the rest of the series. Like book one
yeah,
was like you finding yourself. Book two was, hey, this is what it is, and that's just what
yeah,
it feels like to me.
mm. Yeah. Because and book 1 is a lot of stage setting, so
Hmm.
yeah, and book 2 is sort of it's settling into itself, but oh, but yeah, there is so much. Like, I think about how much I've written now, and it seems insane. Like, what am I writing today? Hang on. I'm writing chapter 779.
You're the next One Piece.
The, the guy who writes One Piece originally said it was going to take 5 years.
Yeah, yeah. It's now
So
it's
I very much understand that. It won't be that drastic because One Piece has been going for what, 10, 15 years now?
yeah, it's something like that.
It,
It
it
might be.
won't be that drastic. Because I've got 4 volumes planned out, and I'm like, this month I should be finishing off volume 3.
Speaking of like that, I am curious. Like, how do you write? Like, do you set up? Like how much do you know ahead of time, and then like so like do you like get where you wanting to go? Like you're like I know
Yeah,
this, and then you're like let's fill in with sprinkles and that
yeah,
type of stuff. You put all the little flavor in.
yeah. So every writer falls on a spectrum between what they call pantsers. People who just sort of fly by the seat of their pants, sit down in front of a blank page, and have no idea what's about to come out. And then on the other end, you've got your architects who, build and plan to the point where, like, by the time they actually sit down and write, the book's two-thirds written. And I definitely naturally incline towards the seat of your pants end of it, but um, there's a lot of danger there. Like it's so easy to not have a through line, to be very great in the moment, but nothing ends up coalescing together. You write yourself into corners. You spiral off on pointless tangents. So what really clicked for me to finally get this thing working, um, sorry, was to basically build a skeleton of an outline.
Yeah.
So I knew the whole story, like, where it started, key points along the way, where it ends. Um, but it was always very bare bones that I've been slowly fleshing out as I go along. So that gives me the flexibility to, um, come up with new ideas and write other stuff as I go along. But it also means that I have a structure to work with so I don't get lost in the weeds and go off in the wrong direction and write my story in a corner, because I can't afford that, because I'm not writing a book that I can then revise and publish. I'm writing chapters days before they go live. So I have to get it right beforehand. So if I'm going to be foreshadowing something 6 books down the line, um, I need to know what's coming. Yeah. And bits and pieces like that. Like, and I get a lot of people who talk about when they do a reread, they'll pick up details that they missed the first time because they didn't
Oh
realize
yeah,
they were relevant.
absolutely.
Like, I was like, what it's about chapter 5 or so. Jason kills that first dude,
Yes, the builder
and,
cultists. Like when
and
that
calls it
clicked in my
the order
head,
cultist, and that doesn't come back for a book and a half.
yeah,
Yeah,
when that clicked, I was awestruck.
yeah. And there's lots of little bits in this. There's so much foreshadowing that little seeds that I've been planting that people won't see paying off until way down the road. I hope. I don't want like a Westworld situation where the whole season's built around a twist that everybody guesses halfway through episode one.
Yeah, I think you're good there. I mean, sometimes like your little sprinkles that you drop in. I think sometimes people can you can tell like, oh, this might be something, but it's never
Yeah,
like, oh,
yeah.
this is the
People
thing.
grab onto it because and I love that. I love watching people speculate. Well, I think my favorite kind of speculation is when someone will get something really far down the track that's really, really important, almost exactly right, and they'll be completely ignored by everyone else in the forum.
That's great.
I'm just like, oh my god, that's totally it. Has it all been busted? It's like, no, no, no one's paying attention to it. Oh, excellent.
Wipe that sweat off your brow.
Well, I mean, I'm not that worried
Yeah,
because yeah, because I'm not building a story around twists. I'm not
yeah.
M Night Shyamalan.
The one thing
You know,
about your story, is like
yeah.
you can go. I think, your writing style is just fun.
Mm,
Like you can know what happens no matter what. Like I don't think the spoilers like would taint your
no,
story at all. It's like the joy is in the moment of the story itself.
yeah, and that's very deliberate. Like I want people to feel like it's like there's a lot of downtime chapters. Like people are just hanging out, having a conversation.
Having a
That
Barbie.
tends to be when I'll slip in a lot of my like world building exposition. But I want people to feel like you know it's just a good time to hang out with these characters who are friends because the friendships are quite critical.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's I think it's why a lot of people dislike sort of the second volume, especially 5 and 6, because what I was doing there was exploring what happens to Jason when you take away that support structure.
Yeah. You
Because
juxtapose it.
without his team who understand, because like his family are there, but they don't really understand what he is now and what he's going through. So he just becomes more isolationist and more dark and starts making more sort of grim, horrible decisions that feel right at the time, but are taking him to a darker and darker place, which means he's making darker and darker decisions. And then volume 3 is sort of a very long process of recovery from that.
Yeah, you touch on like
Where like
when
he doesn't turn back into who he was in the first volume, but he's, this sort of amalgam of like he gets back those traits while still being affected by the sort of responsibilities he has now.
yeah, you touch on so many like important topics as well, like mental health and all that stuff. And
Mm,
and I think you approach it extremely healthily. Like even like characters that have been not all in on it, you
yeah.
see like the benefit it like shows like a you've shown like how it takes time for these things to heal, and like that support system that Jason has is like extremely important to him. And then b
Mm,
it's just like you show like how positive of a thing it is overall, and it's just so like such a well discussed like thing
yeah.
within.
And there's also regression. It's not just like, okay, I'm doing the right things and I'm just steadily getting better now. There's fallbacks and drop offs as he sort of situations that remind him of when he was in sort of a darker place. He
Yeah.
tends to take darker actions um and yeah, no, that aspect of it matters to me a lot. Like one of my very early mistakes in community building, where I was trying to just engage with everyone in the comments because I only had about 5 commenters in those very early chapters. and the first person Jason meets, he ends up killing. Like, it's not a good
Yeah.
person. They end up in a knife fight.
Good old Landomir.
Um, yeah, he accidentally kills him and has a complete freak out because he killed a person. And I had these people in the comments who were unhappy with those early chapters. And it was a lot of, look, if it was me, I'd be roaming around like snapping necks. Like, and I'm saying, look, he's not in the SAS. He's just, which is essentially our Navy
Yeah,
SEALs.
yeah.
Um, he's just some guy. Because they especially didn't like, I think it's chapter 9, where the entire plot of the chapter, and it's an important one because that's where he meets like Rufus and Farron Gary. But the plot of the chapter is he's just been brained with a shovel. He briefly escapes, gets brained with a shovel again, and recaptured. Um, I'd say that was the chapter where I lost most of my early readers who bailed early. And a lot of that is the genre,
Yeah.
like because lit RPG and sort of affiliated genres like progression fantasy and there's a lot of wish fulfillment in there,
Yes.
and my story is definitely a part of that.
Yeah, like power fantasy
But
type stuff.
yeah, that power fantasy, and I don't have a problem with that, but um, there are people who really dislike anytime that power fantasy is challenged. Like, it's meant to be go to another world, get power, then steamroll over everyone. There are people who are looking for exactly that, and there are a lot of stories that cater to that. To the point where I've actually seen ads on Royal Road for stories that are marketing themselves as OP power fantasy. Like, they're actually saying, nope, no challenges here.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't think that's essentially bad. Like, Superman's an OP power fantasy.
Oh, yeah.
It's all about what you do around it. Like, oddly enough, I find Clark Kent a lot more fascinating than Superman. But
No, I completely understand that because like
yeah.
he like forces himself to be a dichotomy. Um,
Yeah, and the idea of being a person when you have this power of a god, but still the sensibilities of a person, because you have this responsibility to be greater, more, and I tap into some of this with Jason. Like, when he's on Earth, he's one of the most powerful beings on the planet, and he doesn't handle it well.
yeah. Like speaking of that, because like speaking of like checking him,
Mm.
making sure. How do you make like these super compelling villains? Because like how
Well,
do you,
'cause one of my big criticisms has always been, and I think this is not entirely invalid, that my antagonists, certainly early on, were quite weak.
see now? I like to think of it as you set a goal like of a big bad, and then
Yeah,
it like it's video game esque. Like you have this goal
yeah,
character, and you're
yeah.
branching up, and then like your arcs are
Well,
like the shift of that, and I
yeah.
just
Well,
enjoy it.
my early antagonists, people like Cole Silver and Lucian Lamprey, who are effectively
Mini
um
bosses.
they were very similar characters because they were both very sort of domineering. Like, they were kind of like avatars of toxic masculinity because they both have this sort of same goal of taking this strong, beautiful, powerful, self-assured woman
Yeah.
and then like breaking her like she's a horse. Because they feel, challenged. They feel that need to tame, to exert their power. Um, and a lot of my early antagonists are quite flawed in ways that affect their competence. And that's kind of necessary because Jason wasn't great. Like in terms of like getting out there and fighting, he was still learning. He wasn't especially powerful, so he needed antagonists that either um, weren't going like the stakes weren't so high that they'd kill him, or that they themselves had exploitable flaws. Um, but yeah, a lot of my antagonists tend to be like too big to challenge. Like I think the builder makes for a solid antagonist. Because I think I'm getting better at this as I go along.
I guess like that question is more framed towards like these later
Yeah,
books in the series because like
because the intention was always for the antagonist to get more dangerous as Jason became more better equipped to fight them. But like something like the builder, um, that's like when the bad guy's gravity.
yeah.
Like you can't fight that. The best you can do is try to get whatever it is you need done in the moment done. Because you can't kill gravity, and even if you somehow figured out how, that would ruin things quite badly.
I guess Jason can in his astral realm though.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. No, that's complicated.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
hey, it's your magic, bro.
yeah. Yeah. No, the mechanics of like sort of transcendent level beings. That's more the realm of like volume 4. When we're getting into the end game stuff. So,
Which I'm super excited for. I've thought like
oh, yeah, me too. I really hope people like the ending. Like I've because like I said, the further I am from what I'm currently writing, the less fleshed out the sort of immediate stuff is. But some of the stuff at the end, like there's this one scene, like the climactic scene at the end. I've probably written that in my head a dozen
you can
times.
tell me if you want. I'm all ears. I'm all ears. Come on.
No,
Uh,
no, because that's the thing. Like I don't want to write it because J.K. Rowling wrote that sort of last scene when they're older at very early on, and sort of put it in a drawer, and basically just said, "This is where I'm going. Like I'm going to get to the point where I can pull this out," and she did. And she put it at the end of book 7. Um, I'm I'm doing something kind of like that, except I'm not writing it. Like because when I finally come to that point, I really want it to be the culmination of everything that's come before, and I want it. And theoretically, after writing that much, I'll be better because you do anything for this long, you get better at it.
Absolutely.
Hopefully,
Um,
because I do think I'm a better writer than I was, back when I wrote book 1. Um, but yeah, but I'm really looking forward to that end. But like, I had this idea of 12 books in my head for a long time, and I'm like, how the hell am I gonna? And then eventually, I just said,
just do
okay,
more
no,
books.
it's not going to be 12 books. It's gonna take as long as it's gonna take. So I told my publishers that, and they were like, yes, please.
Something that like really excites me, and that I appreciate in like situations like this is an author not wanting to just continue for the sake of continuing. Um, I
No,
I
I,
like
I
that there's going to be an end. It's something to look
no.
forward to.
Oh yeah, and I think there has to be an end for a few reasons. One, like if you're gonna have a story, it has to have a conclusion. The other thing being, if you're not working towards some kind of conclusion, it's going to hurt your narrative momentum. Like, because it's not going to feel like you're building towards something, it's just going to feel like you're going on. And I mean, that makes sense to a degree because, like, real life doesn't have a meta plot.
Yeah.
It is just, one thing after the other as you muddle through life. I mean, maybe if you have like some sort of like goal that you want to reach, like a career or something like that, you can have something like that, but for the most part, it's just one thing after another. But stories aren't real life,
Yeah, yeah,
and they shouldn't be. Otherwise, why bother reading them? It's like my dialogue. Um, my dialogue isn't well, dialogue in fiction in general isn't the way people actually talk. And I think my dialogue especially falls into that camp because like I want my dialogue, and when the characters are together and they're bantering away, I want those to be the conversations people wish they were having. Um, because yeah, it's easier to be witty um, when you get to plan it out ahead of time and then go back and edit because you came up with a better line.
yeah. Um, and
But hmm,
speaking of, we've been talking about endings, and we've been talking about
yeah,
going back and editing. You said you had an hour of time.
yeah,
We're running out of that, so
yeah.
I won't take up too much. I do have a request of you though to end this.
Go ahead.
Do not kill Stash.
I think there would be a revolt. I don't think I can kill Stash, and I don't think I can kill Onslow.
Well, yeah, like that hurt. Like I was like, I know he's a summons, so he's okay, but that made me like spiral. I was like, if he's willing to do this to Onslow, what is he gonna do this? Ugh.
Yeah, because no, Stash dying would be dead.
Well, because you killed the I can't remember her name, but her frog companion. Yeah, she got a
Yeah,
cooler big guy, but hey,
August her name was. Yeah,
don't make
Autumn.
me.
Oh, was it Autumn? Yeah, 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 and she yeah she ended up with like a weird Hydra frog thing. Yeah, yeah. No, I think yeah, I think killing off Stash would start a revolution.
Yeah. All right. Well, I am going to stop recording.